right, everybody, welcome. I have got a treat and a legend for you. And all I could say is that he actually, he kind of signed himself up because he started talking to me. He's like, hey, you got a lot, you're doing some officers. I see you got a little bit of 275 focus, but when are you going to have a sustainer on? And I'm like, oh, shit. Okay. I got the 5 generations. I got to navigate the officer and the enlisted, but you're right. Like there's other parts of the regiment, especially as we start to get into the modern days, definitely some legends that I need to kind of pull into the loop. So I'm like, you know what? It's like the typical like private thing. I totally pulled like a private thing on him. I'm like, I need a volunteer. And the first guy that like looks at you, that's the dude you pick. So that's exactly what I did. But, Will Richards, Sergeant Major retired Will Richards. And I actually did serve for a little bit up in 275. It wasn't too long. Most of it I was actually in the NCOIC cell up in S3. Unfortunately, we didn't get a lot of overlap as a first sergeant. But just a little bit about him. So he originally originates in 375, where he spent most of his time actually there. He parachuted into Afghanistan immediately following September 11th, and then he was in Echo Company 275. Real quick question, Will. You stood up Echo Company, right?
Yeah. So when I got there, it was me, the first sergeant at the time, and I think there may have been a company XO. And that was it.
Yeah. So definitely, was integral in that part, and we'll dive into it as we kind of get into the episode. Then went on to be the first sergeant of Echo Company up at 275, and then HHC of the 75th. And in Fort Benning, and then eventually the S4 NCOIC of the 75th, prior to going to 4th Infantry Division, Fort Carson, Sergeant Major Academy, obviously somewhere in there, and then a G4 Sergeant Major, and eventually finishing in 181, Multifunctional Training Brigade up in Wisconsin. So, he's definitely got a long career and a lot of stories to tell and a lot of things to talk about in his time of the 75th. And when I first he was one of the very first people that reached out when I said, hey, I'm standing this up. I started, putting stuff on social media and everything else. Like, 1, this is a great idea. 2, here's some individuals that you should think of. And I think he was probably a little bit surprised when I said, cool, well, you're one of the guys. And I've actually had a couple of people that have reached out to me. Shout out to one of them that I remember, Jesse Vasquez. He reached out and he said, hey, you need to have Will on. So, Will,
yeah, I appreciate it.
To see you, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I certainly, when I was talking, I was thinking more along the lines of, Clay Usis and some of those folks, Mark Morgan. But I am certainly honored and humbled that you would consider me for this. So thank you. It's
absolutely. Cool. Well, spoiler alert, we are definitely going to sit down with Clay and Mark Morgan. Him and I ironed out the dates while I was over there in Germany. So nice. He will be on as well. So everybody listening, you can look forward to those absolutely legendary sergeant majors coming on the podcast as well. Well, Will, I know you've had an amazing 2 years, since retirement. But I'm going to ask you to go back to like way in the way back machine. So, we want to tie that bridge. We want to talk about growing up in the 75th, that brotherhood, what it meant and everything else to benefit, people that, served in the 75th, currently serving in the 75th, or maybe looking even at going into the 75th, and want to kind of tie all those people together. Once a Ranger, always a Ranger, as it kind of goes. So if we can go back in the Wayback Machine, why did you want to be a Ranger?
So I don't, if you go way back when I enlisted, there was, recruiters, they weren't offering option 40 contracts. They weren't, discussing, hey, you can join the Ranger Regiment. Here's what a Ranger is. I literally woke up one morning, decided I didn't want to go to college anymore. I couldn't sit through another day of classes. I needed to do something different. I grew up in a very small town in upstate New York. There were 96 people in my graduating class, and I knew if I didn't do something different, I probably would end up staying in that little town and never leaving. So instead of going to class that day, I walked down to the recruiter. And at that point, I think at probably about 15 years old, I started working in a restaurant across the street, doing dishes. Worked my way up to just about almost running the kitchen there. And when the recruiter said, "Hey, what do you want to do? You've got an ASVAB score. You can do whatever you want. What do you want to do?" You're 18 years old. You have no idea what you want to do with your life. All you know is what you're doing at the time. I said, "Oh, do you have cooks?" And he kind of laughed at me, and now I know why. But I said, "Yeah, sure, I'll do that," because it was something I was familiar with. I think about my first day of AIT was the day where I realized I probably made the wrong choice. At that point, I had to make a decision to try to find something else to do. When you're that new, reclassing is not an option. So I thought, well, maybe I can, let me look at airborne school. So I did that, went to airborne, pretty good. And my first assignment was actually to Germany. And then the Ranger recruiters came down. The recruiters from RIP came down and gave their class at airborne school. And I thought, this is awesome. Like, this is what I want to do. I knew right away. So I think I talked one of my roommates into doing it with me. And we graduated from airborne school. The RIP instructors came down. We threw our stuff into the back of a stake bed and ran up to the RIP barracks, and it was on from there. But it was by far, I would say those were by far the best choices that I made in my military career, and they were also just by happenstance. So it worked out the way it should have, and it worked out for the better. So.
Did you, like, when you were going through, basic and everything else and like volunteering for airborne school, in that population, did people kind of look at you like differently? Like, holy crap, like this guy's going to go jump out of planes. I mean, because it even happens even for the combat arms, like people are like, I would never do something like that. Like, why would you want to go do something stupid like that? But I imagine it's probably a little bit worse.
Yeah, when you're in a big bay at night full of other cooks, and you tell them, "Oh, I just volunteered to go to airborne school. I'm going to jump out of airplanes." You certainly get some looks, and you get some, "I don't think I could do that." And I don't think, I think that a lot of people probably, not cut out for that. But I think, you can do a lot more than you think you can do. Most times you really can. You may, jumping out of an airplane, you may think that's the scariest thing in the world, but until you stand in the door of a C-130 and you're looking out and it's just you in that open air, there's not a better feeling.
Right.
There is not a better feeling. It's a blast. Exiting that aircraft is an absolute blast. So definitely got some weird looks though.
I would say the only thing that's better than, right before jumping is being a jump master and getting to hang out the aircraft, for 3 minutes. Like that,
those
man, I would give it
days.
Yeah. I would give anything just to be able to do that. Like right now, like I loved that feeling and like, the control and just, knowing, what it all means. Like, it's just an amazing feeling, especially especially up in Washington State and some of the like, Point Salinas drop phone. Oh, Rogers drop zone, and going around the Mountaineer, the valley, and you got Mount Rainier in the distance. Like, oh man, beautiful. My leave.
Yeah. And you catch some of those late afternoon jumps where the sun's going down. And, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. You can't beat it.
Yeah.
I loved jump mastering. Was probably, some of my favorite days on the job for sure.
So what was it, I mean, so we've had a lot of perspectives of, arriving to your first platoon, and what that was like, especially back in the day, back in when it was hard, as we say. But, for you, arriving and, what was that like, because especially during those days, that was a lot smaller of the formation, and before the Echo companies, I mean, there was not many people that were not 11 Bravos,
Yeah. HHC was a very small place, back in the late 90s. And I will tell you that my experience arriving to 3rd Battalion was, I promise you, much different than your experience or any other 11 Bravos experience arriving to battalion. So I got to battalion. I think it was like a Friday afternoon. And at that time it was in the old 375 compound. So
Mhm.
HHC was, across from the dining facility, and we had, we lived up on the third story of HHC. The cooks, I think it was the cooks and the mortars were up there.
That's a good combination.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And my dining facility manager at the time, Sergeant First Class Howard Gehring, he he kind of received me, brought me in, and like I remember one of the first things he told me was, "Hey, I'm really sorry we don't have a room ready for you right now. We're gonna, you're gonna end up rooming with this guy temporarily until we can get your room." Very apologetic. I didn't get smoked. There was none of that. It was, frankly, I was a little bit shocked at how that went.
You were waiting for the shoe to drop.
Yeah, yeah. You hear all the stories in RIP about from some of your instructors and whatnot. So it was a much different experience, and I don't think I really got smoked until I started working and I opened my mouth. And and back in the day, I had probably more mouth than I did rank. So it was, I think I tell a lot of my friends I spent, my first year at 3rd Battalion with my feet elevated off the windowsill in the dining. So I was, for at least that first year, I was probably more the strong ranger than I was the smart ranger. But it didn't take me very long to figure out more work. So
yeah. Well, I will say that it didn't matter that you got rank. You still had a mouth on you. At least that's what I remember.
Yeah. It's pretty funny. When I first joined and I decided to join, I told I had a couple of weeks before I went to basic, and I told him, talking to my cousin at the time, and I said, "Yeah, I'm going to join the Army." And he says, "Are you crazy?" He says, "You will never make it." He said, "You have too much mouth." He's like, "You can't handle people telling you what to do." And I said, "Yeah, you're probably right. So I'm just going to have to get as much rank as fast as I can, as quick as I can." And little did I know it takes a little bit more than that, but it all worked out. So
it's funny that you say that, because a lot of people told me the same thing too. They're like, "You hate being told what to do." And I think my response was probably not like as well articulated as you, but I remember being in the Army, and like coming up, like I'd probably make actually the worst Army person ever, because I don't like being told what to do. I hate being told what to do.
The same way.
And everybody's like, "Well, once you're a CSM, no one tells you what to do." And it was actually Pete Rothke that corrected me. He's like, "When you're a sergeant major, you have no control over your life. Like everybody's telling you what to do. Like, and actually like throwing stuff on your schedule and your calendar and everything else. Like it's absolute chaos, but I didn't believe it.
Yeah. You probably have more people telling you what to do once you become a sergeant major. And I think, but honestly, I think that's what makes a good Ranger. I think that type A personality, that wanting to be in charge, that wanting that extra level of responsibility.
That's a good point.
I think all the best Rangers that I've ever worked with all had that personality attribute. They wanted to take charge. They wanted that level of responsibility, and they sought it out. And I think that's what made a lot of them good.
I agree, and I think that's why we actually do some things so much better than others. They're painful when you're going through them. Like I always think of I don't know why my mind immediately went to this. Maybe it's just because we're talking about airborne operations, but Jumpmaster Refresher with Daryl Thies and Bernie Felino. Like, oh my God, what a pain. Like when we were validating the lanes, prior to people going through, or like EIB or something like that, like, God, what a painful fucking experience. But it's because everybody thought they were a master of the craft, or wanted to take charge, just like you're saying, and wanted to make it as good as possibly, they possibly could. But you look at our Jumpmaster Refresher courses that we put people through, like they were remarkable. Like
they were awesome.
I mean, the level of knowledge we passed on to new jump masters was unbelievable.
I mean, I very distinctly remember many afternoons of doing rehearsals with Daryl and Bernie, and I think Bernie was I I was a first sergeant towards his tail end of the time at BCO.
Oh, were you? Oh, okay. I didn't
Yeah,
realize you guys had overlap
yeah,
too. That's
yeah.
awesome.
I think right at the end. But yeah, we had a little bit of overlap. But yeah, all the first sergeants out there, all the platoon sergeants out there, walking through very detailed, and just those jump master refreshers were great events. They were always something that I look forward to. I enjoyed those.
Yeah. So, going back, to your early days, being a cook, working in the chow hall, and a lot of people don't appreciate how much cooks work and their hours that they pull during those times, so, talk about that and talk about those experiences and what that was like. And, trying to, at the same time, know that you still have to train on Ranger tasks, and you have to do Ranger things, as we see, and we'll get to, you jumping into, Afghanistan.
Yeah. So, back in the day, late 90s, and I think probably even to this day, it's, and I haven't talked to many of the cooks in the last 2 years. I think I talked to Sergeant First Class Bashard up at 275 about a year ago. But even to this day, it's very difficult to get
Bashard. That's a name I haven't heard in a while.
Yeah, we'll talk about him too, because I've got some good stories about him. But he, it's very difficult to get cooks to go to the Ranger Regiment, just to get them to volunteer. So I think my first probably 2 years at 375, there was a time where we were down to, including the dining facility manager, there was only 7 of us. It was myself and 5 other cooks, like actually cooking in the kitchen, and then the dining facility manager. And when you're in that situation, I think we spent a solid 6 months where we worked 7 days a week. And you're up at, you're in the kitchen at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, and you're not leaving in some cases till 2000 at night. And when you're working all day, every day, 7 days a week, for close to 6 months before you get any help, it's just, not only are you doing that, but you also have to find time to go to the range. You have to find time to do CQB. You have to find time to do jumps. You have to find time to do PT. You have to, there's a lot of other things that come with being in the Ranger Regiment that, don't involve your everyday job when you're a logie. So, trying to find the time to squeeze all that in while you're cooking for 800 people, 3 meals a day with only 6 of you, is certainly was a challenge. And then I think, eventually at some point we worked a deal out with the engineer DFAC across the street, where we were doing weekend on, weekend off. But it didn't matter, because we did, the food and the quality of it that we put out. Nobody wanted to go to the engineer DFAC on the weekends that we were closed anyway. So it just was what it was. But yeah, for the first couple of years, until we really started to get some cooks in, it was pretty challenging. But it was also, a lot of fun. And that core group of the 6 of us, there was a lot of camaraderie there.
Yeah, I imagine.
An absolute ton of camaraderie. So, when you spend that much of your time every day with those 6 individuals, it's hard not to, become a real tight-knit group of people.
Yeah, especially, you talk about PT, but, unlike other organizations, you still get that 5-mile standard, and that's not something that you can just pull out of your ass if you're not doing something.
No. Yeah. I was always, I think even today, I could probably go out and pass a PT test at 60% standard, and I'm retired, I've been retired for 2 years. I could probably go out and pass an ASVAB or an APFT today. But back, when you're talking, you have to meet that standard at 80% across the board, throw in a 5-mile standard. Oh, and by the way, back then we were also doing 20 and 30-mile ruck marches every quarter.
We talked to General McChrystal about that. Yeah.
And I always, frankly, I enjoyed those. I did my very first 20-miler about a week after getting the 3rd Battalion. And that was the worst one. I think after like mile 3, my feet were a mess. At that time, I didn't really understand how to prepare your body for something like that, especially your feet. And having only been in battalion a week at the time, nobody really had talked to me about how to prepare for that. So by like mile 3, I don't even think I made it around the airfield. My feet were, a mess. And then by the end of it, take my boots off at the end of 20 miles. I think I'm not going to lie, I probably finished that last mile, with a tear streaming down my chin. It was a rough one, but I finished it. And then once that first one was out of the way, every one after that was pretty easy. I can remember doing a 30-mile where we ran the last 5 miles, just to do it.
Yeah, just because.
Yep. But it was a challenge, but it was fun for sure.
So what was it like, for Ranger School, getting prepped for Ranger School? Because anybody going to Ranger School out of the 6 of you, that's one, obviously that's something that we were pushing and we were trying to do.
Yep.
But, and I'll admit my ignorance. I don't know. Was it as big a priority for you guys, prior to the, Echo company standing up and everything?
So I would say to me, it was a priority. I can't speak for anybody else, but for me, it was always a priority. It was something that I knew I had to do if I wanted to stay in the regiment, number one. But it was also to gain, you want to gain that level of respect. I mean, you remember what it was like to, even in a line company as a non-tab, spec 4 running around. It's not good, so you get treated a completely different way. So that was no different in HHC back in the late 90s. So I went through in 99, and the first time I went through, I got cellulitis in Derby in my legs. I got poison ivy really bad. I must have scratched it in my sleep or something, and it turned into cellulitis. So I ended up getting med dropped from Derby. They gave me the option. They said you can stay here in the gulag for however long it takes to heal up, or we can med drop you. And being from 375, I said you can med drop me because I'm not staying
just
here
right there.
I'm not staying here for 2 to 3 months in the gulag just to do details every day. I'll go home, I'll get healed up, and I'll come back right in a month. And they kind of were like, well, you probably won't come back in a month. I said, no, I'll be back in a month. So I went home, got better, had Doc Caldwell at the time sign off on my so I could go back. I went back a month later and I went straight through. So I think there was maybe one class in between that I missed, and I went straight through. And that was that I think there was one other cook who had graduated right before me, but the two of us were probably the first in a long time at 375 to get our tabs. So it was a great feeling to come back to 375 with your tab. It's certainly, what it's like being in a line company, how you're treated.
Yeah, absolutely.
No different in HAC. And frankly, I think as a cook, it's probably even a little bit better. Because there's just not many, you don't see it in the rest of the Army. I would go out for schools, ALC, SLC, and I would be the only one in my class of the entire ALC or SLC for all the logistics MOSs that had a tab, unless there was another Ranger there who obviously probably had their tab too. But just as a cook to have your Ranger tab, it really kind of sets you apart from your peers. There's only, I think at any given time, it just depends. There's typically between 20 or 30 cooks in the Army, and they're almost all in regiment that have their tabs. So, you can imagine how much that helps with, promotions and just a myriad of things. Once you get your tab in the regiment, it opens up other schools that you can go to, Pathfinder, Jumpmaster, things like that. So it was a pretty big achievement for me personally. And then, more importantly, though, I think it sets an example for some of the other cooks, some of the other logisticians, not just cooks, but supply guys, the NBC guys, riggers, all of them, to see other loggies out there with their Ranger tabs. It's just an extra motivator for them, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Quick question, hitting the pause button. When did you graduate Ranger School in 1999?
I was in class 1099. So October, like late October, early November. I don't, to be perfectly honest, I don't remember the exact date. I
We
just know it was
graduated
like,
Ranger School in the same fucking class.
no, we did not.
We did.
1099?
Yeah,
Are you kidding me?
we did.
No shit.
Yeah.
I had no idea, dude.
I did not either.
Yeah,
Holy
I had no
crap.
idea. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow,
So
that's freaking crazy.
from my original platoon, the very first day of Derby, the only two people from my original platoon were me, and an officer from the 82nd, some lieutenant. Last name I think was like Lackey or something like that.
Wow. Actually,
Lackner or something like that.
yeah.
But he was yeah, it was just him and I. And of my Ranger School class, like I were obviously very, remember very few people, but
Yeah.
it was it's like a whirlwind at the end of that class.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I know.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's crazy though. I had
Yeah.
no, I'm gonna have to go back and look at my Ranger School picture now and
Yeah.
see, you got to be in there somewhere.
Well, yeah, shit, I haven't looked in forever. I don't even
I
remember. And it's always like hard to tell. Like when you look at the Ranger School photos, like
Yeah.
sometimes you can't even find yourself.
I was just gonna say that I had a hard time when I looked at my class photo, even finding myself, because I think I was only like maybe 150 pounds when I started.
Yeah.
So I was down to like 125, 130
Yeah.
when I finished. I looked like a sunken skeleton. So it's it's difficult to even see myself in those pictures. And I still go back and look at some of my old graduation day pictures, and I'm like, oh my God, how did I even survive? It looked like I was been a prisoner of war for a year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I didn't weigh much more, but I was definitely taller, and it was brutal after rain. I mean, yeah. How much weight I lost too.
Yeah, I remember coming home eating like 5 meals a day for like 3 months, dude. It was, and being a cook, you're around food all the time.
Yeah, no shit.
So I would get up in the morning. I'd go to like stop at McDonald's on the way in and get like a McDonald's breakfast. I'd cook breakfast, eat there, and then I'd eat lunch there. And then I'd stop at like get McDonald's on the way home, and then I'd eat a full dinner at home. And I did that for like 3 months. Just it's like a nonstop hunger.
Yeah, absolutely. But cool. I can imagine being a cook though. I would be crushing some food there. That would be ridiculous.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
All right. So talk to us about, jumping into Afghanistan, and understand that it comes from a point of jealousy, because at this time, and I tell it because it's relevant, and it's also, I'm the host for the podcast, so I get to share. But and the reason I say is jealousy. So at this time, when the towers fell, I was in Germany. My company was in Germany. Part of SECO was in Germany. We were doing training. So instantly, like when they said, okay, terrorism, Afghanistan, all this stuff, we're right there. Like we're like a 6-hour flight from it. Like it makes sense for us. And then I remember coming back, and like they're like, hey, it's going to be a huge plan, like everything else, like 275 will be incorporated. We're like, okay. And I remember the morning waking up at my house, newspaper sitting on the front steps, and 375 in the darkness of the night had jumped into Afghanistan, and being like, you've got to be fucking kidding me. 375? Like, were they even on RF1? Like, what the hell?
I don't think we were.
I know you were not. And we've confirmed that with a few guests as well.
So I will tell you, there are very few things, and to segue into this, I would tell any young Ranger out there today, keep a journal. Keep a journal of what you do. That's because what you are doing, you don't realize, I think, what you're doing right now, but 20 years from now, you're going to look back and you're going to realize that you were part of history. So keep a journal. Take pictures, when you can, but try to keep pictures. Try to keep little keepsakes, whatever you can. I did not do a good job of doing that. And there are a lot of things about my career that I wish I had a better memory of. But this is one of those things that I do. I remember very, very clearly being in the dining facility at 375 on 9/11, and watching the news, right along with everybody else, and just looking over, to my buddy next to me and saying, oh, business is about to pick up. And sure enough, it did for the next 20 years. But it was, it wasn't long, they locked us down that day. We weren't allowed to go anywhere or do anything. I think the only place I went that day was down to Tissa to stock up on MREs because I knew we were probably gonna need them. So a few days later, I got a phone call from the HHC first sergeant, who brought me into his office, and he said, Rich, I have a choice to make. He said, I have 3 slots for this jump into Afghanistan. One of them's going to be me, 3 CCP slots. One of them's going to be me. One of them's going to be Doc Cotwall, and I have one more slot. I have a choice between you and an 18. I think the medic's 18 Bravos.
68.
Well, it wasn't one of our medics.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So there would have been an 18 Delta. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So he said, what do you think I should do? And I said, well, obviously I want to go. And he said, well, yeah, that's what I was thinking too. So he told me that day, it was only a couple days after 9/11, that's what we were going to do. And from that point on, we started doing rehearsals, out there on the drop zone with engineer tape, taping things off and doing walkthrough rehearsals. And then, shortly after that, we left 375 middle of the night, flew to Oman, and we stayed there. And then October 19th, shortly, a little over a month after 9/11, we got the call that we were going to go, and that's what we did. From that point on, it was, getting kitted up, getting our chutes on, loading onto the C-130s, and all that cadence about 64 Rangers in a C-130. That's a tight fit, dude.
It is. It is.
It is a very tight fit.
I've unfortunately had to do it once for an in-flight rig into Florida. It was absolutely one of the most miserable things I've ever done.
I think it was about a 3.5 hour, 4-hour flight. And if you're drinking water all day, like it wasn't a pleasant plane ride. A little bit of low level there towards the end. But I got, I wouldn't say fortunate, but I was the first jumper in the right door on the 3rd aircraft. So, because I was the lowest ranking person in the CCP, I had the majority of the equipment. So
makes sense.
At that time, I was still, pretty young, hadn't put on a ton of weight yet. So I think I maybe weighed like 150 pounds. And that I think my ruck weighed almost as much as I did. It was so heavy that I could barely, you couldn't even stand up with it. In order to get into the door of the aircraft, I literally rolled over on my side, got up on a knee, and I was, arm out with my static line in it on a knee in the door while they're shooting off chaffs. And then when I got to go, when you get the green light and you get that tap on the back to go, I literally just rolled out the door because it was the rucksack was so heavy, and it was rolled out into pitch black, no illume. The only illume really is the few buildings on the objective that are burning from pre-assault fires. It was very dark, and I think you probably know when you jump, you have a routine. You exit the aircraft, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, you check your canopy, gain canopy control. And then from there, my routine was always, I popped my chest strap, give myself a little bit wider canopy, looked around, got a bearing of where I was. And then, most, even training jumps at night, most of the time, you had a little bit of a loom. You could see tree lines, you could see the ground. That night you couldn't see anything. So as I'm working through my process, about the point where I get to the point where I'm going to lower equipment, I pulled my equipment and just smashed into the ground. It was probably the hardest landing I think I've ever had. It was so hard that the D-rings were like sparking off of rocks as I was being dragged across the ground.
Holy shit.
It was a rough one. Landed, got all my stuff packed up, cut a little, we were leaving parachutes there on the objective, cut a little bit of my parachute off, cut my static line off, made sure I got a little bit of a souvenir, packed it all up. And then I went to find people to link up with. And the first person I found was First Sergeant Burns at the time. And I don't know if you remember those old like the EPIRBs, the old rescue radios. They were just like a little small brick, but they were like an emergency radio.
Yeah.
And his when he hit, he damaged his or something, and it was like real loud, right? So I can hear that off in the distance, and I'm like, what the hell is that? So I walk over and I'm like, hey Ranger, what the hell, what are you doing? Shut that thing off. And he's like, I'm trying. And I said, shut that shit off, Ranger. And he goes, hey, who is that? I said, it's Rich. He goes, it's First Sergeant. And at the time I was like, oh God. Oh, sorry, First Sergeant, can I help you with anything? But it was, and then we went to went on, did the mission, dealt with a few jump injuries. I think we had a broken ankle, and it was an officer. I can't remember his name. I want to say Messerschmitt for some reason, but broken ankle, couple little jump injuries. Obviously, there wasn't a whole lot going on the objective that night. But it was, we were in, we were out, and by the time it was on Fox News, we were back in the chow hall in Oman watching ourselves on TV. So it was pretty cool. And I definitely hear from a lot of the 275 guys. When I got to 275 in spring of 2005. People see your mustard stain and they're like, yeah, get that. And, then you got to hear all about it. Oh, we were in Germany. That should have been us. Well, it wasn't. It wasn't. And here I am with my mustard stain. So it was, So I get that for, anytime I talk to old school 275 guys, you always hear, we were in Germany. This should have been us. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, it's just, we got to give each other shit, and I mean, and we've talked about it. The sentiment at the time is like everybody, and even like General McChrystal, talking about Panama and talking about some of the other things that happened prior to 9/11. Everybody thought we were going to miss it because at that point everything was quick. Panama, Grenada, Mogadishu, everything happened extremely quickly. So everybody thought that like if you don't get in on the initial part of it, you're going to miss it.
Yeah.
None of us knew that we would have more than our
fill. Yeah, for sure.
We would transition 5 ranks, while we were still fighting in the GY.
Yeah. 11 to 14 rotations later,
right.
I think I had 11 rotations at the end, by the time I left regiment, but there are some of you guys out there who had 14, 15, 16 rotations overseas.
I think Kurt Donaldson has 19.
Yeah. So and then you look back, you quickly realize that a quarter of your career is spent downrange.
Yeah, absolutely. So. But that was the thought at the time. So even in those early days, like 2004, 2005, no one would have predicted that it was going to be going on as long as it did. So
no, but the early days were the best days, though. Honestly,
that's true. Yeah,
there was a lot of fun out there at the MSS in Baghdad and doing some other places. I think I got pretty fortunate. I always seemed to deploy with good platoon sergeants, and frankly, at that level, you're deploying like platoon size elements, especially to the MSS. Charlie Company 375, Vic Ballesteros.
There we go.
Yeah, and man, that was probably one of my best rotations, because we were cooking, we'd get up in the morning, cook breakfast, go do PT, work out during the day, whatever, go cook dinner. And then as soon as dinner was over, go get your kit on. I'm driving for somebody, or I'm in the turret for somebody, or clearing rooms with the platoon sergeant and the medic. So it was, those early days were by far, the best days before we weighted the Humvees down with penalty boxes and all that. So, but it was fun.
Well, and especially during those earlier days, when we had to drive and we had all this other stuff, we relied on those sustainers to kind of do some of those jobs and to augment,
Yeah.
either gaps in personnel or gaps in functions, all the time, from jumping
Yeah.
operations to driving operations and stuff. I mean,
Yep.
as a platoon sergeant, I had Team Kilo, and it was a medic, I think I had a mechanic, and
Hmm.
then there was another guy. I can't remember who it was, but he oh no, yeah, he was a supply guy. Well, definitely Gabe Huft. I always took Gabe
Oh
Huft.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
always had to
Gabe.
always had to take him out on stuff just because
Yeah.
it was always comedy having him around.
Yep. Yep.
So, the question I wanted to ask on that though, you're Will, you're a ranger through and through. There's no doubt about that, from the beginning, and all the things that you've accomplished in your career. But at the same time, you still have a different perspective. You have
Yeah.
a different perspective, so your kind of observation as a sustainer that had the other things, and so your secondary job would be some of the stuff we talked about, being the CCP, on the
Yep.
objectives, jumping in, or hey, we just need you to fill this gap because we don't have individuals, in the platoon. What was kind of, provide some observations of, what you thought of, the combat arms guys, and, and doing that stuff from, I hesitate. It's not an outsider perspective because you weren't an outsider, but it's a different perspective just
Yeah.
because of your
Yeah.
job.
Yeah. It's very different. My perspective of the line guys, um, always professional, um, and maybe a little bit crazy sometimes for sure, but certainly professional, and very good at what they do. It. I think I probably have. I don't know. I've probably been on target 150, 200 times over the course of my career. I've sat through, a ton of con op briefings. Um, you know, I think I'm probably one of the few cooks in the army who could, plan a special operations raid and run it,
Absolutely. Yep.
and do it, successfully. Um, but the line guys were always very helpful. If I needed to understand, what black side security was or what white side security was, I could always go to one of the platoon sergeants, and they would fill me in. And by the end of my career, it was almost like another, like being able to speak like a second language. Being able to talk with other line guys on that level about things that are going on target, understanding how to do SSE and all that, bit the whole 9 yards. And I always, Brian Stover, I've been on a bunch of targets with him, and just
Agreed.
yeah, just watching Swede, watching some of the other first sergeants and how they do their thing. Everybody does it a little bit differently. I think every time on target with a different platoon leader, a different platoon sergeant, or a first sergeant, everybody runs it a little differently. There's always the SOPs, there's always the TTPs, but it's like everybody's got their own little individual flair. You know what I mean? And it's fun to watch. I think you guys probably, for the line guys, I think you do it every day. So I won't say it becomes boring, because I don't think it's ever boring, but it almost becomes second nature, to the point
Yeah,
where I think you guys don't ever really you guys never get to stop and take a step back,
that's true.
and look at like the whole picture. You see, maybe as a platoon sergeant or first sergeant, you get to, see a little bit of the bigger picture. But I think for me, I always got to see, like the real big picture, because I could go up to the jock in Kandahar or Bagram or Tikrit and sit in there all night, and just watch different targets and how things unfolded. And I did that almost every night downrange. I would spend in the jock just watching how things were going. Not really because, not really for any other purpose than I wanted to learn. I always felt like as a sustainer in the Ranger Regiment, I always felt like I wanted to understand what you guys were doing, so that I could better support you. And I wanted to know, like, I wanted to understand the different phases of every operation, how a target unfolded every night. What would happen if you had to remain over day somewhere. I wanted to know how that stuff worked, just so I could help better support everybody. So having that outside perspective of being able to, you get to watch how your platoon does something every night, right? But I always got to see how every platoon did something. I'd be in the Merc chats, the whole 9 yards. So it was pretty cool just to watch how different platoons did the same thing, but just a little bit differently. And it was always fun to watch. More fun to be out there on target, but still a lot of fun to watch every night, because hearing that jackpot every night, really would bring a smile to my face. So,
I'm glad that you brought that up, because, I do, so I left 275 in 2009, went up to ROTC, and then came back in 2012. So you were still there. And I do remember, at a point, and I want to say one of the first times was with you, and I don't remember, it might've been your captain, it might've been your company commander, or maybe it was the XO or something like that. We were doing AAR after fixed wing ballet, and you getting up, and
I think I remember this.
Yeah, you and your commander getting up, and or whoever it was, I don't totally remember that part of it. And you were talking, but you weren't talking from like a sustainer's perspective. You were talking from like a tactician, and like, hey, this is why this matters. And I do remember, because at that time I was at the NCOIC in the training cell. I do remember going, holy shit, like, wow, like, it just being amazed at how knowledgeable, you were, and other individuals within the sustainment community were. But it was part of that evolution of Echo Company, and, and what you guys had to do as a support, as a support element, but then also being integrated in everything else in the formation. But it's not really a surprise, because you guys grew up and all of us were figuring out our roles and our responsibilities in the GWAT and on target. And, when we'd identify a gap, well, you're usually looking for a person to fill that gap. And for the most part, there's very few Rangers, no matter the MOS, that were not willing to fill that gap. I remember getting yelled at one time by Bernie and Palastier for having the battalion surgeon Top Gun a striker. They're like, what in the fuck would you do? Like, he's one of a kind. He's the only dude that can, and you're having him Top Gun. Like, and I'm like, he wanted to. I'm like, I needed somebody to do it. For whatever reason, our normal gunner wasn't out. So, and he said he knew how to work a 240, and he showed me he could operate it. So,
and that was commonplace though in the early days. You know what I mean? To have cooks out there, to have mechanics out there, especially the mechanics, because if a vehicle went down or something, you had them on hand, or if it was hit by an IED, you had them on hand. But absolutely. I think that was pretty commonplace until Bashard got shot, and then once Bashard took a round in the leg on the roof on a target in Kandahar. I think at that point it was like, well, why is a cook out there on target? Well, a cook's out there on target because you needed an AB or an AG, for a 240 team or whatever. That was unfortunate, but at the same time, I could see the hesitance, in a commander to allow, some of the loggies out on target. And who knows if, I haven't been in regiment. I left regiment in 2014. I don't know if they're still letting, if that's the case, or if, cooks are getting to do anything. No idea. But it was, up until that point, it was pretty awesome, getting to go out, for me, especially, I had grown up in regiment, had been in regiment at that time for, 12, 13 years. I knew everybody. So, I think I don't think there was a night that I wanted to get on target where I couldn't get on target.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I could easily say, hey, you got room in the MEV? Let me hop in, so.
No, two comments I wanted to make on that. The mechanics as the drivers, man, that was probably like and I think I got it from Denman. Actually, he told me he was doing it, and I was like, I'm doing that too, because I mean, literally those drivers will be like, hey, here's what, like, there's something going on, like, we're stopping, like, I can tell there's something wrong with this striker, or anything would happen,
any vehicle,
they'd be like, all right, let's limp it to the VDO. And then the mechanic, while we're hitting the target, he's sitting there like figuring it out and come up with a hodgepodge fix. So it was absolutely like just huge combat multiplier to have those guys. But I will tell you, and this is another thing that I kind of wanted to talk to you about. I remember, so my first job, out of regiment, going to, a squadron, striker squadron. My expectations for my FST first sergeants, my forward support first sergeants, I was expecting Will Richards. I was expecting.
Sorry, guys, I didn't mean to ruin it for you.
Yeah, I was expecting Frank Lopez. And or even Huft. To a certain degree. And some of those individuals, or Clay Usey. I mean, just go sit here, go down the legends. The Rolodex of legends, and I was like, holy shit, like, not just only from a leader perspective, but from a knowledge management perspective of, hey, this is why I need you to figure this out, because it impacts the tactics of the entire squadron. And they're like, yeah, I don't understand what you're saying. Like, I have no idea. I'm not a tactics guy. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like,
I had a similar experience. My role up in Wisconsin, I was an OC. I had a battalion full of OCs. And I would go out to NTC to be like a guest OC out there, and talking to some of the BSB sergeants major out there, or like their ACO, their first sergeants. It was, I don't want to say disheartening, but it was a little bit disheartening, talking to some of those folks who don't, they know what they're supposed to do. But they don't really understand, some of them, there were a few good ones out there, but most of them didn't really understand, the bigger picture of what the BCT was doing, or how what they did affected what the BCT could do. My big thing, my big thing was, as logisticians, and, even when I was the G4 Sergeant Major at Fort Carson for a short period, trying to explain to, I would be in rock drills trying to explain to some of these younger sustainers, officers and senior NCOs that, you have to focus on being able to expand a commander's operational reach, right? That's your number one goal. What can you do to expand that commander's operational reach and allow them to achieve the objectives that they need to achieve, without having to worry about, where am I getting fuel for my vehicles? Where am I getting bullets for my guns? That stuff just needs to be there. So if you can, trying to make them understand that if you can just, everything you do, focus it on how to expand that operational reach, you'll probably be a success. And I think a lot of them just don't, they don't take the time to really understand the language of the line guys. You know what I mean? And how understanding that language and understanding what they do can help you be, a better sustainer.
But it works both ways, I will say
that is true.
Because I will say that, so again, Striker, I know this is, we're supposed to be talking about the 75th, but this is a good conversation, because like, I remember in one of my first conversations, like talking to my mechanics, talking to, everybody else when I was a squadron CSM, and I'm like, listen, I am used to dragging a vehicle into the Ranger motor pool with the wrong gas. All the tires are, popped off the chassis. It's kind of on fire. And somebody took a dump in the back seat. I don't know why. I need this fixed by Monday. And it goes into
by Monday.
Yeah, and it goes
probably
into
fixed Sunday afternoon.
And it goes into a black hole, and it's fixed and I show up
Yeah.
and we signed for it and we got it on Monday, like, so
Yeah.
I'm not understanding why things are taking so long.
Yeah. And we would do it with like a minimal personnel, you know what I mean? Because again, and it wasn't just cooks that were, the regiment was always struggling with. It was mechanics. It was,
absolutely.
it was all of those, riggers, all those specialties. So I can remember nights in Tikrit of, vehicles, strikers coming in, with the slat armor peeled off, after getting hit by an IED, tires, big chunks out of the tires. And, Mike Green would look at me and be like,
oh, Mike Green. Chief Green. He became Chief Green. Yeah.
Chief Green now.
Holy shit. That's a name I haven't heard in a while.
Yeah.
He was definitely one of those mechanics on my striker.
He would just look at me and he'd be like, I'm going to be up all night with this one. And that guy and the rest of his mechanics, they wouldn't go to sleep till that thing was,
absolutely.
FOC, and it was ready to roll out the next morning. Yeah. Because we only had a handful of them. It's not if one went down, you know what I mean? That really affected what we were going to do the next night. So, that was it. They were, the mechanics, a great group for sure.
Yeah, I remember getting in an argument. I think it was actually with Denman, because I was the only one in Iraq that had an extra striker. So I had one striker that I could always, if something happened,
the float.
Yeah, the float. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah, exactly. And he, him being a jackass, he got blown up in one, and like all the wheels, and it was done. I can't believe that everybody lived, by the way. But and I had to send it up to him, and I was like pitching a fit, like, yelling at Bernie, like, why do I got to send my striker? It's not my fault that he got blown, but there wasn't enough. I mean, we had what we had, and that was, when strikers were, despite popular belief, Ranger Regiment had strikers before anybody else, but there wasn't a lot of them, and ours were specially made for us. So,
yep, I love those things. They were great. I think I got I was me, Swede, and Doug Pallister, the RSM. So you had the Eco First Sergeant, the ACO First Sergeant, and the RSM all in the same striker get hit by an IED.
Oh shit!
Crit. Very light, not a lot of, but I swear by him. There's still a lot of people today who are like, "Oh, the MRAP's better." No, dude.
No, it's not.
No, it's not. The strikers are a beast. I don't care what anybody says.
I've seen them. I've seen them fly in the air 6 feet, spin like a top, and land on the top, and everybody walked away alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bumped up, but alive.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, since we're on the topic, your view on, Abrams Charter, and going out, because I imagine, after your time and leaving the 75th and, going to the academy, which is a whole nother flipping experience. So we could have a whole nother podcast dedicated to that, but we won't. Like that would be like the shame of USASMA or something. I don't know, but
I have a different take on USASMA.
Okay,
I'll talk about that for Abram.
But anyway, going out, and you were definitely master rated, tons of badges, Ranger tab, but so when you show up, you look different. You're a cook, but you talk different too, and you were able to speak this other language, and your experience with that.
Yeah. I personally think Abrams Charter is a good thing. And I look at it really from 2 points of view. I look at it from the point of view of the Ranger being able to improve formations that they go out to. But I also look at it of the point of view of the experience of the Ranger leaving regiment and then potentially coming back. You really get a better appreciation for the regiment once you leave.
It's Ranger appreciation tour.
It is for sure. It's at first, and I will say going to USASMA, I think for me personally was a good experience, because coming out, I think if I had gone from straight from that op tempo of the Ranger Regiment into a regular, BSB or, just a conventional Army unit, I think I would have had a very difficult time winding down and adjusting to that slower pace. Because it is, no matter what anybody says, it is a much slower pace. You're still going to have days where you're busy, but it's not anywhere near, deploy for 4 months, come back, train for, train, take a month of leave, and you're back overseas again. It's, everything's a little bit more stretched out. You have a little bit more time to do the things that to train and do the things you want to do. So that year of break at USASMA really helped me to kind of slow myself down, and just get out of that fast pace, constantly going, constantly doing things, and just kind of easing into a conventional unit. And then Abrams Charter, just being able to go out, Rangers leaving regiment and going out to other formations, and you really have a good opportunity to take what you've learned in the regiment, and improve those formations, because and I've always looked at it, on the bell curve. You have your top 20% at one end, your lower 20%, your 80% in the middle, and it's really finding those folks in the middle that want to excel, and then helping them improve where you can help them improve. And there are a lot of folks out there who want the Army to be a better place, who want their formations to be, run more efficiently, do things in a more heightened way. So, I think Abrams Charter is a great thing. At first, I think at first everybody's like, oh my God, I have to leave regiment. This is, and to be honest, that was, leaving regiment was a rough day. Leaving ECO specifically was a rough day for me.
I was standing there. I remember it. Yep.
Yeah, it was a rough day. But to be able to go out and have a positive effect on the rest of the Army, and especially as a sergeant major, our sphere of influence, significantly expands once you put that star on, and your ability to affect those formations in a positive way, significantly increases. So I always, you'll see, there's probably pictures of me in 181 where I'm, laying in a foxhole next to a reservist, trying to explain to him how to fill out a range card, or, these are, this is how fields of fire work, but those were my favorite days, because, you've got some young kid out there who wants to learn, and you have that skill set and you have that ability to impart that wisdom on them. So I wouldn't want to have to do it like the officers do it, where they leave regiment all the time, they go do another command somewhere and then they come back. But I do think it would be beneficial for every NCO at some point to get out and go see the rest of the Army for a little bit, if nothing else than to give you some appreciation for the regiment.
Yeah, it's like one of those things that you don't realize how good you got it until it's gone.
Yeah.
And it's also, it's a great thing for recruitment, because you go out there and you find that talent and you encourage them to aspire to be better, and maybe even potentially go to the 75th. But then also, and General McChrystal said it, in his episode when we sat down, he's like, the Rangers were never meant to be this special operations organization. They were affixed to a problem. And it was exactly this. And if you talk to some of those, guys, some of the Rangers, in the early days, 2 years, 3 years, and then boom, you're gone, and you're out there in the, in the conventional Army doing your Abrams Charter time, out there. And it was dreaded, but it didn't change, for almost a decade, where you could just stay and you didn't have to leave. But, the idea was to improve the Army coming out of Vietnam. Yeah,
absolutely. And some of us are fortunate, some of us got to spend 17 years. I think Bernie Felino had a few more than I did. I think I left right at the beginning of my 17th year. But some of us were fortunate enough to grow up and spend the majority of the GWAT in the regiment. But definitely going out, and I think you see that with Reese Tickle, for example.
Absolutely. Brian Barker, Nash.
Nash. Yep, all those folks. Swede before he retired.
Yep.
Just getting out there and making those formations. I guarantee you that every formation that those folks were, those Rangers were a part of, will tell you that formation was substantially better after they were there and had done what they had done. I guarantee it.
Absolutely.
Even what you're doing,
I appreciate that. Thank you. and the thing that I say, you know, when I talk to guys, when, you know, when you go out into those formations, the people that want to do better and be better, they gravitate towards you because they realize that you're different and that you have never, you still believe in the ethos that you need to lead by example in everything you
Yeah.
do. You know, you know, you talked to, you know, you told a story about laying down in a foxhole. One, that's unusual for a sergeant major to do it,
Yeah.
unless he's doing it for a photo op. And
Yeah.
two, you being able to do it as a sustainer and talk through somebody through a range card, like that blew, you know, that kid still
Yeah.
probably talks about that. Like, you
Yeah,
know,
probably.
like this sergeant major, you know, and he's a cook, like, and he sat down and he was like, he still probably tells that story, you know,
Yeah.
but they tell a story because it's so abnormal. I mean, I remember, you know, how the amount of times I would hear, you know, as a CSM, like, hey, CSM, why are you out here doing this with us? Like, I'm like, where the fuck else would I be? Of course I'm out
Yeah.
here. Like, this is
Yeah.
what we do, you know?
Yeah, exactly. You can, you know, you can take the ranger out of the regiment, but you can never take the regiment out of the ranger.
I
You know
love
what I
it.
mean?
I love it.
It'll never happen. You know,
We are
you
making that into a t-shirt.
there you go. It's a 5% royalty. No, just
All
kidding.
right, fair.
But even, you know, even today, like that, even in my current job, you know, I still have that attitude of, you know, I want this place to be better. I
Yeah.
want to try and improve, you know, every day, try and improve this, you know, this organization. And, you know, the flip side to that coin though is you, when you go out to the conventional army, you have to tone it down a little bit. You know,
Yeah.
you kind of have to reel yourself in a little bit because
Yep.
there's a big difference between the way you would talk to a ranger team leader and the way that you would talk to a team leader in a BSB.
Yeah.
You know, and another good reason why going to the academy, you know, kind of helped me a little bit.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Help me, you know, kind of reel myself in a little bit and how to, you know, while you're dealing with senior folks at the academy, they still didn't spend their entire career in the regiment. So you still have to, you know, you still have to figure out how to talk to people in a way that, you know, will get them to buy into what you want to do.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
So it was good for that.
So, you know, going on that note, you know, what did you know, you talked about Echo Company. I remember standing in the foyer of 275 headquarters when the company leadership, it was either after your change of responsibility or before, I don't totally remember, you know, and I think they gave you a Wilson pistol.
They gave me a it was a Kimber 1911.
Kimber, that's what I meant. Sorry, my bad. But I do remember the emotion you had, you know, and I remember, you know, just, you know, the sentiment and everything else, and, you know, those soldiers of Echo Company being there. But then I also remember too, you know, and again, this is when I was, you know, just getting kind of back, you know, to regiment, you know, it was within the first year of me getting back, but how many people from across the battalion were there, you know, to kind of see you off. So my question is, you know, I'd love for you to talk about just, you know, what that brotherhood meant to you. Just the brotherhood of the 75th and, you know, most of your life and be a part of it.
Yeah, it was, you know, I think 275, you know, I was there from 2005 to 2013. And I think just that time period was probably, you know, the height of my career. It was like, it was really more or less like a family. You know, we would do Hamlin farewells and, you know, spend all night out together. You know, we would go to Ranger balls and we would spend all, you know, I remember drinking out of a flask with, you know, with Mac and Petrie, you know, in a hotel before a Ranger ball, and just, you know, hey, you want to try on my Medal of Honor? Like, no, dude, I don't want to try on your Medal of Honor. Like,
that's so Petrie.
Yeah. You want to try? No, like I would feel weird. It just, no, I'm not doing that. But that's the kind of, you know, it was, we hung out together, you know, we did things off duty together. You know, all the families knew each other. So it was a very tight knit group. You know, if I needed some time out of eco, you know, to go do something, I would I don't think there was a platoon sergeant's office that I couldn't, as a first sergeant, just walk into and sit down and BS with you guys.
God, I fucking
all
miss
of them.
that.
Yeah.
Oh man,
Yeah.
you're absolutely
Yeah.
right. Or even,
Yeah.
another first sergeant like Ray Barrett or
Yeah.
Chavez. Oh God,
Yeah.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
absolutely right, man.
Just, if you wanted to laugh, you'd go down and hang out with Denman for a little bit, or Ray Barrett over in HHC, or that there were so many that I could name, but it was the most tight knit group in my 24-year career that I can ever remember, and those 8 years were probably some of the best years of my career. And eco was a really big part of that. Yeah, I think as you mentioned earlier, it was me, a first sergeant, and I think Dave Kang was the first company XO.
Yeah.
When I got there, and I got to HHC, I signed into HHC 275, and the next day we stood up eco. And that first year was really just getting people, bringing people in, developing systems, just getting a baseline. And the first 2 years was of eco was a little bit rough. They had, and I cannot remember his name to save the life of me, but the first sergeant they brought in was from like 528 or something, had never been in the regiment, never experienced the regiment. So I think those first couple years I probably spent more time in his office trying to explain to him how the battalion worked and why we did the things the way we did them, to try and help keep him out of trouble. But really, so he would just get I didn't want him to come in and try to change the way we were doing things so drastically that it took away from what we were trying to do. So those first 2 years were rough, and then Troy Dill took over. Troy did a great job of putting systems in place and getting the company organized and efficient. A great job at that. I think when I took over, I think for me, and I'm gonna go back real quick, because when I was a young E4, I had just graduated from Ranger School, and I went to the promotion board to become a sergeant E5. And I smoked that board. I think the sergeant major at the time told me it was the best board he had seen in like years. And I was like, okay, whatever, that's all great. But he asked me, immediately after that, he asked me, what do I see myself doing, in the regiment? And I told him, at the time, this is well before eco. I said, I want to be a first sergeant someday. Like, that's what I wanted to do. There was nothing more that I wanted to do in regiment than be a first sergeant. I thought, that would be like the best job. And I'll never forget. And I cannot remember which sergeant major it was. I had been in battalion for only a couple years at that point. Back then, when you're that young, you just want to get out of that room.
Yeah, right.
But I'll never forget when I told him that, he laughed at me. He literally laughed and said, "You're a cook. You can never be a first sergeant in my regiment." And that it didn't really hurt me. It almost forged something in me. You know what I mean? Like, wow. I was going to be, I knew at that point, like, someday, I don't care how I do it, I will be a first sergeant in the regiment. And then eco comes along. And that was, the perfect opportunity. And I'll never forget, Doug Pallister pulls me into the talk into crit. And we had just moved from Ramadi to crit. So I had been up for like almost 4 days straight, helicopters back and forth, moving all of our gear, getting everything into crit set up, bringing all the platoon over. I had been awake for like 4 days. He pulls me and he says, "When's the last time you went to sleep?" I said, it's been a couple days. And at the time he was RSM. I said, "It's been a couple days, RSM." And he says, "Go to bed. But before you go to bed, you want to be the next eco first sergeant?"
Oh shit.
I didn't know if I should shake his hand or shed a tear, but I was like, yes. absolutely. I want to be the next eco first sergeant. Absolutely. He says, well, it's all yours. Now go get some sleep. I don't think after that, I don't think I went and got any sleep because I was
Yeah,
so
no
excited.
way. Yeah.
But I'll never forget the day that I pinned on first sergeant, right before I took the company. I told that same story to all the the eco guys standing in formation that morning, and I just let them know that, hey, don't let anybody tell you what you can't do in life, because you can always do whatever you want to do. You just have to put in the effort and get it done. And when I took eco, it had been around for about 4 years at that point. It was really just sustainers doing sustainment things. There wasn't a whole lot of, I think, because we had just stood it up, and this is not to take away from Troy or the previous first sergeant, but there wasn't a whole lot of effort. I won't say effort, but emphasis on building an identity, right? Because every line company has an identity.
Every platoon, squad, team.
Yep, they all have that identity, and that was one of the things that I really wanted to do with that company was, build up an identity. And I think it probably started like day one, when, Sergeant First Class, now Sergeant Major Vasquez, called me at like 11:30 at night and was like, hey, First Sergeant, I'm out at a range, and the platoon sergeant's out here telling me he doesn't want to repack his ammo, and I just need to take it, and I have to repack it myself. And I said, let me talk to him. He puts me on the phone. I forget which platoon sergeant it was.
God, I hope it wasn't me.
No, it wasn't. It definitely wasn't you. And I said, hey man, I said, here's the deal. I said, you're gonna pack that fucking ammo up now, and you're gonna get it back to my ammo guy, and you're not leaving the range until you do it. And I think the platoon sergeant at the time, Vasquez, kind of heard that, and I think that kind of set the tone. We weren't going to be. I wasn't going to let them, let anybody walk over any of the eco guys. We were going to kind of have a little bit of an attitude, and we were going to have an identity, And when I took that company over, I think there were maybe less than 10 tabs in the whole company.
Yeah.
When I left that company, there were over 70.
That's fucking unbelievable. Wow.
It got to a point where I couldn't send people to Ranger School because I didn't have people that didn't have tabs. My almost my entire distro platoon at one point was tabbed out. Like I couldn't take anybody from that platoon because they all had it already. So there was a point there for a while where I had more tabs in my company than any of the line companies. So it was very important for me. For me personally, to make sure that we weren't just the Ranger support company. When I took that company, the guidon still said RSC on it, Ranger support company. When I left, it had eco on there. That was one of the first things I wanted to do was let's get rid of that, let's get rid of that support company mentality, and let's get a letter on there just like every other company in this battalion. It was very important to me to do that. And I think I was probably pretty successful, at building that, giving them that attitude and doing the things that we wanted to do. I think I had all 4 of my platoon sergeants are now sergeants major. One of them is probably a W4 at this point. I haven't talked to him in a while.
Yeah.
But we had, that whole group, Vasquez, let's see, who else? Norm Carey, a sergeant major. Dave Zeke. Zeke's a sergeant major now.
Yeah. So I talked to him pretty recently.
Yeah, there's quite a group came out of that company. So when I left, I was there for 4 years. I had 48 months there as a first sergeant. That's a long time. Most
that is a long time. It's 2 years.
Most first sergeants get 2 years. So they were very much like my family. They were, there's still several of them that I talk to. I won't say weekly, but probably monthly.
Yeah.
They're just a great group of people, and some of the things that we accomplished while I was there. I don't know if you'll ever. I won't say you'll never see that again, but it was the right group of people coming together at the right time.
Yeah, it was perfect timing because
yeah.
exactly everything you just said.
Yep. And it just made for an unbelievable experience. And those were the 4 best years by far. You're a Ranger first sergeant, dude. Like,
Yeah.
if I want to go jump out of helicopters, I call Hartung over in the 3 shop and say, hey man, can you call the Oregon National Guard and see if we can get some birds up here to go jump next week? And it was that simple. The voice you have as a first sergeant in the regiment is, as a line, even as a sustainer, even as the eco first sergeant, you always got that level of respect, and there wasn't anybody that you couldn't tell, like, hey, this is a bad idea, or hey, there's a reason why we do things the way that we do them, because you get those officers that come in and they've been gone for a couple years and they come back and they've had a command somewhere else. Yeah,
they have the greatest idea ever.
Yep. And you're like, hey, sir, that's a fantastic idea. But there's a reason why we do it this way. Probably because over the 17 years that I've been in regiment, we've tried that idea already and it didn't work out, So you had, you just had a good voice. You could talk to people and it was just an awesome experience.
I love that story, man. That's an awesome story about being, a young sergeant going to a board and laughed at, and then becoming Echo Company First Arm for 40 years and the things that you accomplished in that. Dude, that is so, I love that story. I'm going to tell that story again, like in some way. I'm going to be like, yeah, this one time I was.
Well, don't tell it before my book comes out. No, just
kidding. I mean, it goes back into that journaling thing that you were talking about.
I wish I had done that, man.
Yeah,
I really do.
I actually did for my first deployment. But I didn't do it after that because it became too much, and there were so many things.
Busy.
Yeah. Well, on that note, going back, and trying to think, so what would you say? And I know you've talked about some amazing things, but what would you say your best day is? And then, on the other side of it, what would you say your worst day as a Ranger was?
Yeah, I'll start with my best days. I have a scale of best days in regiment. My favorite days were always days where I was jump mastering, getting to hang out of a C-130 or, C-17. I think, some of my jump masters and we had a ton of jump masters, but if you went back and asked some of them, they would probably tell you, oh, First Sergeant Richards, never let anybody PJ. I always wanted to PJ because, well, there was a couple of reasons, but mostly because it was just so much fun. It was so much fun, and getting to teach younger jump masters. That was really what was important to me, was showing younger jump masters, this is how you do things. This is the right way to do things. This is why we do things this way. So I loved PJing. Those were my favorite days. My best days, and this is not just Ranger specific, but probably for my career as a whole, my best days were always the days where we either promoted people or gave out awards.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those are my favorite. And I was fortunate, I got to watch, kids come in as privates, and, by the time I had left, they were E7s, so just watching that development, and watching them grow, and then promoting people to sergeant first class, or, and really those were the big ones. But those were my best days, by far. And unfortunately I had a lot of them. So, my worst days, I think my worst days at the end were also days when I had to jump. and here's the reason. I think, somewhere along the line, some jump somewhere, I injured my back, never really knew exactly where I did it, but I broke a vertebrae. So, towards the end, being in a parachute harness was absolutely painful. And that was another reason why I liked to PJ, because I could wait and put the chute on, closer to the end. And it just, it wasn't until after I left regiment that I really found a solution for my lower back and how to fix that. So those were always painful days. But my absolute worst day was probably the day that Christo May was killed. That was
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll never forget that night. I think Gabe Huff and I probably sat out back behind the J-Lock in Bagram and shed a tear for a good couple hours. It was a rough night, and then we flew out to Kandahar for the memorial, and seeing now General Hodney break down given that memorial, and Daryl Thies. Daryl's one of those guys where he's a legend. Clearly, he is about as hard as they come.
Yeah, stoic,
but very stoic. But to watch him, break down, and just knowing where he was that night when that happened, and what he had to go through. I immediately called him as soon as he got off target that night, and first thing I asked him was, "Are you okay?" Because just knowing how a Ranger formation moves through a target, knowing where the FSO is in relation to probably at that time the sergeant major, where they would be, I knew he had to be pretty close to where he was when that happened. So my first question to him was, "Are you okay?" And once we got past that, then we had a little bit of a conversation about that night, and that was a very difficult night. I still think about Chris every single day. I don't think there's a day goes by that I don't look down at my arm and remember him. So that was by far my worst day. And then to a lesser degree, leaving ECO, that was a really tough day, because you kind of put your blood, sweat, and tears into that company for 4 years, and to see what that company. Yeah, to see what that company was when I started versus the way that company was when I left, that entity, that company was extremely well respected within the battalion. The platoon sergeants were extremely well respected amongst the other platoon sergeants. Everybody was, and it went back to what we talked about earlier, making sure that everybody knew how to speak the line company language, so that we could better support you guys. They all had that ability. They all had that little bit of swagger about them. They weren't just the riggers. They weren't just the cooks. They were eco rangers, and just seeing that little bit of swagger that they had at the end, kind of leaving that was very tough. And then going over to the L&O shop and watching another first sergeant, cradle your baby. It's that was a little bit, that was challenging, because I physically had to force myself from stopping. I don't go over there every day, stay away from that company, and let that first sergeant do what he needs to do. It's his company now. But that was I think that was right up there, probably my top 2 or 3 worst days in the regiment for sure.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing them. And Krista May, I'm actually so talking to Scotty, his mom. We're working on something that I think we're gonna start doing in episodes to honor previous fallen Rangers, and perspective she offered me. And this is just via text message and stuff. She's up at a retreat right now, but she said, "I know all the war stories, but what I don't know is who my son was as an adult, every day, and
her son was awesome.
Yeah.
Her son he was an awesome guy. I had gone up to Kandahar the week before it happened. And you remember the old barracks up there, he was down on the bottom floor. And I remember walking by, I would walk, I was a first sergeant, but I would still walk to the barracks and just see how everybody was doing. I didn't get up to Kandahar very often, so it was great to go up and see the platoon up there. And I remember walking by the room, and he was an E7. I was a first sergeant, but we had grown up.
Yeah,
we had spent a lot of time together. So walking by the room and him going, "Rich, get in here and get on the sticks." With the Xbox controller, come get on the sticks. So I spent probably 2 or 3 hours up there just the week before, him and I playing Xbox together and bullshitting in his room. So yeah, he was he was a great guy. Always had a smile on his face. Always, always in a good mood. Just a great kid.
Yeah, he was. No, he absolutely was. I appreciate you sharing that, and we'll definitely make sure that she gets to hear it as well.
Yeah.
Well, kind of drawing everything to a close, and I will tell you that you've had some awesome nuggets that have given me thoughts for future episodes and future things that I want to pull out of the guest. But I've explained to you, and I've had a lot of conversations with you, what we're trying to do with the podcast, and the whole Legends brand and bring people back into the network, but, just kind of, your own thoughts of, you've been out for 2 years now, and you even said, there's a little bit of, withdrawal that happens, from the formation in the community and everything. But, why do you, from your perspective, why do you think it's important for people to come back into the fold, the Ranger fold?
I would tell you that it is, this group of people you have shared a lot with them, over the course of your life. You think about it, I'm 45 years old, right? I've spent 17 years in the regiment. So almost, probably a third, a little more of my life around Rangers. When you leave regiment, and I think just in today's society as a whole, it's very difficult to keep up with people. There are a few folks that I keep up with, regularly. Jose Trevino, Matt Alexander, there's a few sustainers, Ryan Kite, just a few kids that I still talk to all the time. It's great to talk about, some of the things you've done in the past, but I think it's even more important to talk about what you're doing now, what you're going to do in the future, and just build that network, because you never know, when you may fall on hard times or something. You never know, and there will always be somebody there that you can call. I have probably 2 or 3 people who, if my house burnt down today, that I could call, and they'd say, hey, I got a room for you, till you get back on your feet. And I think keeping people in the fold like that, and building that network up, can help you with that transition. I think some people have a tough time transitioning from the military, because they wrap themselves up, and that becomes like their whole identity. The Ranger Regiment is a huge part of my life. It's not necessarily my entire identity, but it is a very big part. And I do love to, reach out to Rangers from the past and have those discussions, but I also like to find out what they're doing now. Because you never know, they may have an opportunity for you. You may have an opportunity where you can help them. So just having that network, and the greatest thing about it is you may not talk to somebody for 4 or 5 years. I think there was a period where I didn't talk to Jesse Yandel for, probably 5 years.
You're making me feel bad. I haven't talked to him in a while either.
I know, but I could pick up the phone. I know that I could pick up the phone right now, and it would, you just fall back into that relationship and that conversation, and it's like it's like you talked to him yesterday. And I think that's the best part of it, for me. It's just having that core group of people that you can go back to if you need something.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you highlighting it that way. And that reminds me of a couple of people that I actually need to call. So
yeah.
Well, okay. So now saying, you said if your house burned down. So let's talk about what you're doing now. Yeah. Nomad. I've been watching you, following you and everything else for the last couple of years. And, people will see when we put the promo video up, you living in an RV in a van down by the river. But what have you been up to since last couple of years?
My dad busts my balls all the time. He's like, I never thought I'd have a son who was 45 years old living in a van by the river. So it's a little more than a van. Let's start there. It's a little more than a van. It's a 40-foot Class A motorhome. It's a Tiffin, one of the top end motorhomes. It's like a big bus. And after we're done with this, I can give you the nickel tour over video real quick. But so when I decided to retire, my wife and I really weren't sure where we wanted to live. The thought of going back to Washington State was there, but for various reasons, the cost of living, taxes, some other things going on out there, it just wasn't something that really appealed to us. So we didn't really know where we wanted to go, but we know we love to travel. So I retired. I took, I didn't have to go back to work right away. So I took some time off. About a year before I retired, we sold our house right as COVID was starting. And literally April 8th of 2020, we moved into the RV full time. And for the last just short of 2 years, we've spent that time traveling the country. We bounce back and forth from between the East Coast, Florida, where our families live, all the way out to, we've spent time in redwoods out in California. I like to ski, so I've spent my winters. The last 2 years, we spent our winters out in Utah at Park City. I'm skiing. I think this last season I got 48 days in of skiing. So the year before
awesome.
last, I think I got like 42 days in or something like that. I skied so much that it would get to the point where I would have to take a couple days because it just, I needed a break. But so skiing, playing golf. And then in the last, during that time, I knew that if I was going to go back to work, I didn't want anything to do with the military. And not that I had any heartburn with the military or bad experiences, but I knew that I wanted to broaden my perspective a little bit, kind of broaden my horizons and take some of the skills and leadership abilities that I had learned over 24 years in the Army and try my hand in the private sector. So about a month and a half ago, I took a job with Dole Packaged Foods, and basically I manage their charter vessel program. So once COVID kicked off, it became increasingly difficult to get container positions on cargo ships around the world, and that's typically how most companies ship, is in big 20-foot containers, 40-foot containers. And when they started having issues getting container positions, they started chartering charter vessels to do break bulk pallet positions. So think of loading up the back of a C-17 with the standard 40 by 48 inch pallets, right? Except we do it with charter vessels, and we're talking 4,000 to 5,000 pallets at a time. So I manage that program domestically. I handle ensuring that those pallets get discharged, make it to our distribution centers around the nation. So great experience, and it kind of all those years of loading out the battalion, or moving strikers from Iraq to Afghanistan, or all those years of pallet building out back behind the company, paid off, and now I do it on a large international scale. So
See, those skills paid off.
It's been a great experience. I would tell everybody, I would tell anybody who's getting ready to retire from the military, don't panic. I think a lot of people right before they retire, they panic. Oh, am I going to be able to find a job? You'll be able to find a job. You're going to have to learn how to, you're going to have to learn how to speak civilian. You're going to have to learn how to translate your military skills into a skill set that civilians understand. And if you can do that, you will, you'll be fine. I started sending out resumes once a month after I retired, just using my B-level resume. I didn't put a whole lot of effort into it, but I just would float them out there. Once a month I'd send one out on LinkedIn or whatever, just, to a random company, just to kind of see what would come back. And, for the first year and a half, I didn't hear anything back. But what I realized is, my resume, I was using my B resume, right? So I went back, cleaned my resume up, turned it into my A resume. The first resume that I sent out with that version of my resume was to Dole Packaged Foods. They called me back within 24 hours, went through the interview process, and they made me an offer, right away. So I would just say to those people who are getting ready to transition, I know you're probably thinking about it here in the future, make sure that you understand how to write a resume, how to put it into civilian speak, and just know that you have a ton of skills that you probably don't even realize you have. but the biggest one is your leadership skills. That your leadership skills, and especially for the Ranger community, you're kind of like we talked about earlier with that type A personality, those people who are looking for that, they want that level of responsibility, they want to do a good job. That is that's valuable, especially out in the civilian world. That's a very valuable skill to have. So don't panic for those who are getting ready to retire. And I also would encourage people who are getting ready to retire to take some time off. That was the best thing I could have done. Those 2 years of just getting to decompress, waking up every day doing what I want to do and not what anybody else wants me to do, were huge. And I will always cherish those 2 years of being able to do that. So I highly encourage people, if you can take some time off, do it, because it will only benefit you in the end. And then the other thing I would encourage folks to do is don't stay in the Army forever. All right, you have all those skills, which are very marketable, but you got to remember, the longer you stay in the Army, the bigger the competition pool gets on the outside. There's always kids graduating from college. There's always, get out while you're still marketable, and you will have no problem finding something to do. I guarantee it.
That is awesome advice. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that with everybody. And I definitely have some more conversations that I need to be had with you as we look at transition out.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Absolutely. Well, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you taking the time and coming on and, being a legend of the 75th and, sharing all the stories and everything else. Definitely some things that you've said that have triggered other thoughts and other directions I need to go in future episodes. So I really, really do appreciate it. Do you have any kind of closing comments before I close this out here?
No, man, it was a pleasure. And again, it's, and it's just an absolute honor to even be considered a legend of the 75th. I'm very grateful. And I certainly look forward to, some more podcasts, because I'm telling you, there are a ton of people out there who I'd love to hear you talk to, that I know have some fantastic stories, and, happy to share mine with you. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we're going to keep on doing this until, either I run out of breath or I run out of legends, and I'll probably run out of breath before that'll happen. So
yeah, you're never going to run out of legends, my friend.
No, absolutely not. All right. Well, thank you again for coming on the show today, Ranger buddy. I know everybody will enjoy hearing from you and catching up. Hey, everyone, thank you for tuning in to the Legend of the 75th. Make sure you share this episode, get it out to everybody, because, as much as we might think that people know about this, there's still just thousands and thousands and thousands of Rangers that have no idea what we're doing here and have no idea that we've started a podcast that is for them, by them, for the people that they know and they love and they just absolutely look up to. So thank you again for tuning in, and Rangers lead the way.